Hello guys, so I've just finished filming my 3.5-month update for Jensen, and as he is still on the boob feeding, I don't know if you can see, I thought that I would do a quick video on breastfeeding because it's fitting. So I wanted to talk about breastfeeding problems that I've had. I know that sounds really negative, but both times around having both of my children, I found that everyone tells you about the hard things about pregnancy, the hard things about labour and birth, but no one really tells you about afterwards, especially breastfeeding, because breastfeeding I found has probably been the hardest of all 3 stages. Yeah, I found it really difficult and I massively struggled. I managed to do about 8 weeks, I think, with Jasper. With Jensen, he's now 3.5 months and we have had problems, but it's been such a smoother journey. Okay, so the first problem that I've had with breastfeeding is engorgement. Engorgement, if you don't know, is where your boobs pretty much just swell up. It's when they are so full of milk that they basically look like balls, balloons, and it makes it really difficult for baby to feed because your boob is pretty much rounded like this. There isn't like your nipple coming out, so it's hard for baby to latch on. You tend to get it in the early days when your milk comes in, and then you don't tend to ever really get engorged unless you miss a feed or 2 later on in your breastfeeding journey. But yeah, I've had it with both boys, and the best thing to do is hand express a bit of the milk just to kind of get your nipple shape back a little bit so that it's easier for baby to latch on. If they can't latch on at all, they're going to get upset. If they can latch on but it's not properly, then you're going to end up doing some damage to your nipple. So it's a really good idea not to stay engorged, but plus it can then block your ducts, which is on to my next one, and that's mastitis. I suffered from mastitis with both babies, and what mastitis is an infection in your boob, and it's caused by blocked milk ducts. It's basically when you've got more milk in your boobs than your baby is drinking. So yeah, maybe if they're a particularly sleepy baby and they don't stay on the boob for a proper feed, or you miss a feed, or they're not latching on properly so they're not draining them. Or say, I used to do this all the time, but I would feed off one boob, forget which one I'd fed off, and feed off the same one again, so then my other boob would like be doubly full. I don't know how I would notice because surely it would have been a lot bigger, but yeah. So I'd get these blocked ducts and the milk starts to, I guess in a way, go off. It's not, thin milk anymore. It starts to get a bit thicker, kind of like a curdled milk, I guess, like a bit stringy, and you can get blocked at the nipple. The sure signs that you've got it are swollen boobs. They could be hard in places. We could have a hot red patch, or the whole thing could be hot and red. Oh, and flu-like symptoms. So the first time around with Jasper, I had all those symptoms, didn't have a clue what it was, and the midwife told me, well, that's mastitis, and I was like, but I feel like I've got the flu, and she was like, yeah, that's a symptom. This time around, I woke up and I felt really fluey first, and I said to Pete, like, I think I might have mastitis, and Jensen was only about 5 days old, and then I looked at my boobs and I had the red patch and it was hot to touch, and I just got progressively worse throughout the day. And then the midwife came around and she said just to express milk off both boobs to completely drain them, then feed off of both of them so they are completely empty and not swollen at all. And she put me on a course of antibiotics, and by the next day I was absolutely fine. That is one thing that they will always say to you to do, is feed through the pain, because even though it might really hurt, like I used to get stabbing pains in my nipples. My nipples got really sore from it, and the last thing I wanted to do was let my baby feed off of my boobs, and it's really frustrating when someone tells you to do that, but it is the best thing to do because you do need to drain the boobs or they're just going to get worse and worse. If you really struggle to do it, then you can use a nipple shield, which just protects your nipple a little bit throughout feeding, or you can express, just to kind of give your boobs a break from the baby, but then you're still working your boobs. It is really tough, mastitis. My next thing is sore nipples. I had it worse with Jasper. They were red and swollen and cracked and bleeding and a little bit pussy. I know that's really gross. The last thing you want to do is let a baby suck on them. Again, you do just have to do that. I use Lancinol lanolin cream, and it's the safest kind of nipple cream you can use because you could put it on just before your baby feeds and it's okay for them to ingest. So you can literally slather it on before they feed, slather it on when they finish feeding, before you express. Make sure you're constantly covered in this stuff, and that really works wonders. It really soothes them and protects them from getting even worse. And one thing to note as well with that is a lot of people say to you, breastfeeding shouldn't hurt. I do agree with that to an extent, because yeah, if you are really in pain, you shouldn't just think, oh, this is normal, I'll just put up with it, because you're going to be miserable and then in turn your baby's going to be upset. But at the same time, it kind of is normal to have a bit of pain, and I think sometimes when people say to you, you shouldn't have any pain, it's not normal to have any pain, even if you just have a little bit, it can make you think, oh no, something's wrong, when really that might just be a normal pain. It's like when you get a blister for wearing new shoes, because the shoe is rubbing on an area of your foot that doesn't normally have that constant pressure rubbing on it. Like if someone was constantly like rubbing on your thumb like that, eventually it's going to get sore because it's not an area of your body that's used to that constant like sucking. Not for me anyway. So yeah, to an extent, they are going to get a bit sore and a bit painful because it's a new thing, it's a new sensation, it's not something your body's used to. So another problem that I encountered with Jasper, not with Jensen, was that he had tongue tie. And this basically meant that he wasn't able to latch on properly. So if you don't know, tongue tie is basically where the tongue's movement's restricted because it's attached like a little bit further up the tongue to the base of the mouth. I don't really know if I've explained that very well, but you know, for example, like I could poke my tongue out quite far, but someone with tongue tie might be a bit more restricted, just the bit under the tongue there, that bit. You know what I mean, Google it if you don't know what I mean. And because he had that and it went undetected for a while, every other person we saw said he did have it and then he didn't have it, so he didn't get it sorted until he was about 6 weeks, I think, which is quite old. And all they do is they literally just cut the little bit that's attaching it at the bottom. His was really, really mild. Some people it's, you know, really bad to the point where they can't even poke their tongue out. His wasn't that bad, but it was bad enough that it was affecting the latch and it was making my nipples hurt, and I think that's what caused the mastitis. It was a really quick procedure. Of course it hurt him. It was pretty horrific for me, but it was so quick and the pain went immediately, and it then meant that we didn't have long-term feeding issues, so obviously it's worth doing. And literally as soon as he had it done, he latched on so much better, so it really did improve our feeding. Another problem that we had, and this goes back to the mastitis, when I was on the antibiotics for mastitis with Jasper, my antibiotics gave him thrush, which I always just thought thrush was a thing that women got in the downstairs area from like over wiping or something, I don't know. But you can actually get thrush on your tongue if you take antibiotics for too long, and I don't know if it's because I missed a couple, so I was then taking them for like a longer period, or if it can just happen anyway, but his tongue got like a white coat on it, and in turn he then passed that to my nipple. So I gave it to him, he gave it to me. I never had it down there, by the way. And then my nipple kind of was like a little bit of a whitey colour, and that made it even worse, like the sore nipples. It was just a really bad time. Okay, another major problem, this is something that I've suffered with since I was like 15 anyway, and that's that I've always suffered with back pains. So my lower back, even now, it's really, really hurting. Because I've got quite a bad posture and breastfeeding, you know, you've got so much pressure on you anyway, my back just, it wasn't great with Jasper, and it's even worse this time with Jensen. Because unless you have a pillow like underneath me to support him so that he's up like this, I've then either got that pressure on my arms to hold him up to my boobs, or what's easier is I just lean forward. So I'm kind of constantly arching forward, hunching my shoulders, and luckily I've been doing yoga, which has really helped. But I get such bad pains. It used to just be my lower back, now it's the middle of my back, it's my upper back, it's my shoulders. So yeah, that's something that I really struggled with, and it's something that they don't really warn you about. They don't say like, you know, take care of your back when you're breastfeeding because you're going to need all the support you can get. So that's definitely something. Just make sure you're really good with your posture and have a pillow underneath the baby, just so that they're that much higher and it takes the pressure off your arms and your back. Right, this is another one, and I am going to do a separate video on this because it's a topic that, I don't know, I feel like it needs a bit more of an explanation, and it's something that it really isn't talked about. I did a blog post on it the other day, and so many people either said, wow, I've never heard of that before, or they would say, oh my god, I've got that and I never knew it was a thing. Yeah, I will be doing a video, but it's called d-mer, dysphoric milk ejection reflex, and basically it's a physiological reaction to letdown when your milk travels from the milk ducts to your nipple. So for me, I basically get this real feeling in the pit of my stomach, like homesickness. That's all I could describe it as. Like when I was younger and I would stay at a friend's house that I'd never stayed at before, and I felt really anxious, that real empty, like pit of your stomach feeling. I know it like clockwork. I get that feeling, and then about 2 minutes later I feel the letdown, and then about a minute later he wakes up crying. So it's every single time that I get let down. Sometimes it can happen like while I'm feeding, if you get another letdown. Sometimes it happens after feeding. It's a lot worse this time with Jensen, and I don't know if it's because, I don't know, we've got a lot going on in our lives, so I'm a bit more emotional and a bit more anxious anyway. I have no idea what it is, but yeah, it's not great. Like I said, I will do a video, but if you get that feeling, or you get kind of angry or sad or like really, really anxious, then Google d-mer, dysphoric milk ejection reflex. Like I've got that wrong, I'll put it on the screen if that's wrong. And yeah, see, because that might be what you've got. there's not really much you can do about it, but I'll link my blog post below as well. This is something that I've been struggling with at the moment, and that's a low milk supply. So with Jasper, I feel like I struggled with it, but I don't know if I actually did. When you breastfeed, you don't know how much your baby's getting, unless you regularly express and you know how much you're getting in each expressed bottle. And even then, that's not accurate because babies are much better at getting milk out of your boob than an expresser. So, you know, they might be getting more than that, but they might be getting less than that. Yeah, I really suffered with that, and I never thought he was getting enough. And as soon as I switched to formula, he just seemed a lot more settled, and I loved that I could see how much he was getting. This time around, he's always been guzzling milk. You could see it dribbling down his sides. I never really had that fear until about a month ago. I felt like he wasn't getting enough, and he was always like trying to get back on the boob and not settling. So then I thought that my milk supply had gone down. And again, this week, the last couple of days since introducing a dummy, I thought that my milk supply went down as well. But we figured it out. I've spoken about this in my 3.5 month update, which I'll link below. But we figured out that it's probably because he's going throughout the night without feeding, and my body's thinking like, oh, I don't need to produce as much now because he's having such a long break without it. So it's not actually a supply problem this time. About a month ago it was. And if you do think that your supply has gone down, there are loads of things you can do. I will do a separate video on this as well, I think. But things like drinking fennel tea, fenugreek tablets, having more oats in your diet. There's a thing called power pumping, loads, but like I said, I will do a video on this as well. Okay, another problem, and this links back to engorgement, where you get swollen boobs, is latch problems. Now, I've had this with both the boys. I think it's partly the fact that they couldn't latch on properly, and partly that I wasn't really putting the nipple in their mouths properly. But basically, in their mouths, they have the hard palate at the front of their mouths and the soft palate at the back. The nipple needs to be going to the back of the soft palate because otherwise it literally feels like they are crunching on your nipple. And I had that with both boys. So I had real latch problems. And I think in turn that, you know, had a negative impact on me getting sore nipples and engorgement and mastitis and all of that. So really, really making sure that you have a good latch is key. And that's something that I found with Jasper I didn't get enough support with. So with Jensen, I really made sure every time they said to me, oh, your latch looks perfect, I would say, yeah, but it's not, because it's hurting, and I know it, like, you just know it when it's not right. So something like that, if you are feeling pain, you don't think they're latching on properly, then really make sure you ask the midwives, health visitors, doctors, whoever you see, to just sit with you for a little while and really just watch you breastfeeding and sit with you and just really listen to you. Another problem that I found with breastfeeding, it's something that everyone goes through when they breastfeed, and there is a massive plus to it as well, and that's the cramps that you get in your stomach. So when you first start breastfeeding, the first few days, sometimes it can last for the first few weeks, you get these cramps, like period cramps, kind of like contractions, and oh my goodness, they are so painful. They can be as painful as real contractions, but they are tightening your stomach. They are helping you to spring back into shape, to lose that baby weight. You're burning calories when you breastfeed. So even though you've got that, there's not really much you can do. I guess you could use like a hot water bottle to soothe the pain, maybe have some paracetamol or something like that. But yeah, there's not much you can do. But if you do experience those cramps, as long as they're not like excruciatingly painful, it is normal and it's doing good for your body. So that's it. Those are just some of the problems that I've encountered throughout 2 of my breastfeeding journeys. I hope this wasn't too negative. I feel like these things aren't really spoken about enough, and I was definitely not warned about any of these before I had Jasper. So yeah, I'd like to think that I'll be helping someone out a little bit. If you've experienced any of these problems, if you have any tips, if you've experienced any other problems, pop them in the comments below, because it's a really nice little community, and quite often I find like viewers helping other viewers in the comment section, and I think that's really lovely. If you like this, please don't forget to give it a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, click the notification symbol, which is a little bell next to the subscribed button, and it just means you'll get a notification straight to your phone or iPad, whatever you're watching on, as soon as I upload. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day. Bye!